So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk through our new expense management platform, which is known as Concur. So what Concur is going to do is it's going to consolidate the different systems we currently use for our expenses. So Concur will replace company mileage for mileage reimbursement. It will replace the SEW spreadsheet process for those of you who have a company credit card. And it will replace the CRM check request for employee reimbursement. So going forward, for any of these types of activity, from today onward, you will use Concur, okay? We have piloted this software with the Colorado team as well as the America teams over the last 4 to 6 weeks, so we feel like we have a lot of the kinks ironed out. And the feedback on the tool has been very positive. So we are very much looking forward to getting you all using this same system and beginning to see the benefits of the great software that Concur brings to us. So a couple of the benefits that I mentioned are outlined at the bottom of this slide. The first one says single sign-on. And what that means is the way you will log into Concur will eventually be the same username and password that you use to log into your computer. We actually have that functionality available today, and it is available via a link on the SEW, which I could show you right now. So if you go to the SEW, there is a Concur link here, and if you click that, it's going to take you to our single sign-in page. All you need to do is select sign in. And then you enter in your SAFY credentials and you'd be off and logged in. Okay, so you will not need to memorize all your various passwords any longer. Another major benefit of Concur is it has a mobile app, and in my opinion, a very good one at that. So I encourage you all that there's a second attachment to this meeting invite that had the mobile app instructions. And I encourage you all to go out to the App Store and download the Concur mobile app. It will allow you to take pictures of any receipts you have if you're out spending money on your company credit card, or if you have money for an employee reimbursement, you can take a picture of that receipt, and then I'll show you how to bring that into your expense report. So you will no longer need to scan and email those receipts into the accounts payable team. It'll all be done within the Concur application. For those of you that do have a company credit card, Concur links directly with our U.S. bank account. So as you're making charges on your credit card, you will see those come into Concur. So you no longer need to wait until the end of the month to see all of your charges. You'll see them as you make them, and you'll always know what's on your card, which is a very nice feature. In addition, for all these types of expenses, mileage reimbursement, company credit cards, and employee reimbursement, Concur will automatically route all of your expenses for approval to your supervisor, or if you trigger an expense threshold where somebody over your supervisor needs to approve, it will automatically send it on to those individuals as well. So those are the primary benefits of the tool. In exchange for those benefits, we're asking everybody to slightly change how they work, okay? So the way Concur works is everything's organized in expense reports. So no matter what kind of expense it is, it all goes into one expense report. So you might have mileage reimbursement in an expense report combined with your company credit card transactions, combined with some employee reimbursement activities, all in one expense report. And you can enter those transactions as you incur them. So if you have a trip today that you incur mileage on, you can go into Concur and enter that trip, and you would then add it to an expense report, which I'll show you how to do very shortly. And what we're asking you all to do is, instead of submitting trip by trip for reimbursement, batch them all together into one report and submit no more than 2 reports per month. You can do 1 report if you want, but we're just asking you to do no more than 2. So the recommendation here is if you want to do 2, then submit 1 report on the 16th of the month that covers the 1st to the 15th, and do the next report on, say, the 1st or 2nd of the month that covers the 16th through the 30th or 31st of the previous month. The next slide is how to get started, and I'm going to skip over this because you guys have all done that already, and or if you have not, you've received an email from Shirley instructing you how to do that. So I'm going to move on to slide 5, which just outlines or provides an overview of the process. And this slide is slide 5 from the user guide, and it provides an overview of the general process for Concur. So what you do is you're going to incur an expense, you'll go into Concur, and if you don't have an open expense report already, you will create a new expense report. Once that expense report's created, you're going to add the expense you just incurred into that report. You'll add the details for that expense, which again we will walk through here shortly. You'll allocate that expense if you need to. You'll attach your receipt, and then you'll submit that expense report for approval. Okay? If it's the middle of the month and you're batching your transactions together, then right after you attach your receipt, you'd go back to the start of the process. You'd incur another expense, you'd add it to the expense report, add your details, allocate it, attach receipt, and repeat. Okay? So that's the general process. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Concur and log in and walk you guys through this process. Okay, so now I'm inside of Concur, and you can see right here, you see this new, and if you hover over the new, you can say start a report. Okay, so I'm going to select start a report, and the first thing it's going to do is it's going to ask me to fill out some basic information about this report. And what we're asking everybody to do is for the report name, we want you to put in a time frame. So I'm going to say April 1st to April 30th. So that's going to be the time frame for this report. The report date is going to default to today's date, and that's just fine. You don't need to update that. It then asks for a business purpose. So if you have a specific reason for incurring these expenses that's a little bit more specific, you can put that in there. If it's general, like it's just all of your April expenses, just put April expenses in there. If you have any other comments to add, you can add them in the comment field. Once you fill those fields out, you'll come down to the bottom right of the screen and you'll select Next. And at this point, you're inside of your expense report. So you see up here, this is what I named my report. And down here, we're going to eventually see all of my expenses that I'm adding. Okay? You'll see over to the right that I have 2 expenses already that are available to add into my expense report. Anybody that has a company credit card, this is where you're going to see your expenses come in. And you know that from this source. So if I hover over this, it tells me it came from my SAFY Visa card. Okay? So for my first expense, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check this Rock Mill Tavern expense, and I can either drag it over to the left, or I can select Move to Current Report. And so now I'm entering my expense details for my expense I incurred at Rock Mill Tavern. And I'm going to pause real quick just to check any chats. Are there any questions yet? Okay. So when I fill out my expense details, no matter what kind of expense you incur, the details are going to be very similar. Okay. So you're first going to choose an expense type. And I know that this Rock Mill Tavern expense was a meal. So I'm going to type in meal, and it's going to pull up all the different types of meal expenses that we have. And so I select meals employee because that's what this was. Okay. The transaction date, since it came from my corporate credit card, is already populated based on the date that the card was charged. My business purpose is SOAR Team Lunch. Okay? Vendor description, again, because it came from my corporate card, is already populated, as is my payment type and amount. Now we get into kind of some of the newer functionality that Concur brings to us, and that is every employee will be able to code their own expenses. So if I were charging this lunch against a specific fund, I could search for and select that fund here. In this case, I was not, and I want my expense to hit my default department, which is executive, my default state, which is America, default division, and default program. If I instead wanted to charge this to another state or another department, I could do that just by selecting the drop-down box. Okay? You'll see here I have all of our different states. So if I select Kentucky, now it's going to get charged to the executive department in Kentucky, and I can select a division, Bowling Green, program, independent living. So as you incur your expenses and you know what program you are serving, you'll want to reflect that inside of Concur. Okay? I'm now going to attach my receipt. So I come down to the bottom of the screen and hit attach receipt. And out here, because I took a picture of my receipts with my Concur mobile app on my phone, my receipts are already in Concur for me to select. So I'm going to hit this checkbox. If I want to zoom in on the receipt, I can hit the little magnifying glass and it'll zoom in for me. And I confirm it's my Rockmill receipt. And I'm just going to check it and hit attach. Okay. I now have my receipt attached to my Rockmill Tavern expense. And I know that because there's this little receipt icon with a check mark next to it. And if I hover over that, I see my receipt right there. Okay. You will also see that there's this yellow flag that's showing up right here in my expense as well as at the top of the screen. And what it's saying is, it's prompting us that if this expense contains alcohol or tip costs, that I need to itemize those expenses out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to my expense details on the right side of the screen. I'm going to hit the Itemize button. And it's going to allow me to say, okay, the total amount of this charge was $35.26. And I'm going to be able to allocate a portion of that to the tip. And so I search for tips, and I see travel meals, tip/alcohol. Or if I just search for tip, I get meals employee-tip/alcohol, which is the one that I want. So I select that, I enter my amount of my tip, and I hit save. It now tells me I have $28.26 remaining to allocate, and I put that to the meal because we had no alcohol. So now I come back here, I select meals employee, I put in that remaining amount, and I hit save. Okay, so I have now properly itemized my expense, and you'll see up top you have my original expense for $35.26, and nested below it you have the itemizations. Okay. We are asking for tips and alcohol to be itemized because they can't be included in any cost reports or anything like that for our financials, so we want to separate those out wherever possible. Okay? Are there any questions at this point? Don, you can scan your receipt into the Concur system. And so what you would do, if I go back to my Rockmill expense, if I go down here and go to attach receipt, if you were to scan your receipt in, you would just scan it into your computer, hit this browse, and then search for it, just like you would any other file on your computer. Okay, good question. Any other questions out here? Looks like we're good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is that we've shown how to enter and record. Oh, sorry, Diana. The attach receipt button is on the bottom right side of the screen, all the way at the bottom. You're very welcome. All right, so I've now entered a corporate credit card transaction, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter a mileage expense. So I'm going to go up to the top of my expense report where it says the plus sign and new expense, and I'm going to click that button. And over on the right, it's going to ask me what kind of expense is this? And I can either scroll down and find my expense type. I can look at my recently used expense types, which are right here, or I can search for it. So I'll type mileage. And when I type mileage, you get down here the different search results. And I'm going to choose mileage reimbursement-employee. And once I click that, it opens up that familiar screen of expense details that we just went through with the company credit card transaction. Okay? When you're entering mileage, you'll come through and you'll code your department, your state, your division, and your program much the same, in exactly the same way as you did for your company credit card transaction. The only difference is you'll see that we need to actually enter the distance, the from location, and the to location to calculate the amount. And to do that, you click on this link right here that says mileage calculator. So I'm going to click on that now. It's going to pop open a new screen. Okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to start typing in an address. And you see, as I start typing, it's remembering where I've gone before. So if I wanted to go from my office, 500 South Front Street, I typed a 5, and there it is right there. And say I went to my home. I start typing my home address, and there it is, okay? It's now telling me that this is 19.4 miles for my trip. And if I click this button here where it says make round trip, what it's going to do is it's going to double that. So it's going to say I went from my office on Front Street to my house on Caplestone Lane and then back to my office, okay? You'll also notice down here it's providing you directions. So if you ever want to print off directions to get from visit to visit, you can do that. You can put your entire day's visits on this one screen. So if I go from Front Street out to Delphus, I would just type our Delphus office address. And now it has my whole route, okay? So you're just putting in all of your stops throughout the day in here. If any of these trips are personal and they should not be reimbursed, all you're going to do is click this checkbox right here that says personal, and you'll see down at the bottom it now says I have 19.4 miles of personal and 129.9 miles of business. Only the business miles would be added to the expense report for reimbursement. Okay, so looking at the questions, good question, Rochelle and Shannon. There is not the ability, like there is in company mileage, to have the address book. But what it does, as you saw when I was entering, is once you enter an address once, it's going to remember it. The other thing that's nice about Concur is it works off of Google Maps, and so you don't need to enter a complete address. If you start entering it, it's going to find it, and it's going to add the city, state, and zip code for you automatically. Diana asks, why would we be entering personal trips? For the most part, Diana, you're not going to be. So that's a good question. But if there's a time when you're just going from home visit, you swing by the grocery store, and you go to another home visit, you know, a portion of that trip involving the grocery store would not be reimbursable. So you could actually put all of that into Concur and just take the personal part out. Okay. The other thing Concur does is it allows you to very easily deduct your commute miles. So if I have for my day on April 17th, these are the trips I took. I had 129.9 business miles, but the policy is to deduct my commute miles. What I'm going to do is check the box down at the bottom that says deduct commute. And just one time I'll need to enter my home address and my office address. And then it's going to save it from that point forward. And now what it's done is it's deducted another 19.4 miles from my business miles. So now I'm down to 110.5. Okay? So once I've added all of my stops up here in this waypoint section, I've deducted my commute miles. I've flagged any personal trips to the extent you have them. I'm now ready to add these miles to my expense report. So what I do is I click this blue button at the bottom of the map that says add mileage to expense. Okay. Just reading the questions. Okay, so good question, Rebecca. So there will not be an address book going forward, but it will remember your frequent locations. Regarding if we've already got things entered into company mileage for April, what we're going to do is we're just going to, once your Concur training is done today, we will shut off your access to company mileage, but your supervisor can still go in and approve those trips. So we're going to ask that from today forward, any mileage trips you need to enter, you come to Concur to enter them, not company mileage. Okay, Philip, what about manually entering miles? We drop road signs and we usually pick the address and then manually enter the miles we actually did. So Philip, there is the ability to manually add miles. I would not say I recommend it, but you can overwrite this amount right here. Right? So if your from location is Front Street and your to location is Elida Road, and it calculates 111 miles, but you took another route because there was an accident and it was actually 150 miles, you can just overwrite that right there on that field. Okay. No problem. Any other questions on the mileage piece? Can we still enter our mileage from last month? In company mileage, Kathleen? Yes, you can enter any mileage you have that has not been entered in company mileage already and Concur starting today. Diana, regarding commute miles, we're going to have clarified policy being sent out in the coming weeks. So I would say if your policy currently is not to deduct commute miles, just keep going with your current policy, and we're going to be clarifying that as well as some other expense policy items in the coming weeks as we continue to roll this tool out. So keep going as you've been doing. Okay, let me look at my cheat sheet to make sure I'm covering everything I want to cover, and then we'll move on to the next category here. Okay. All right, so we've now entered our mileage. We chose our expense type. We in the transaction date, which is the date I incurred the miles, and actually I didn't set that correctly. So let me update that now. It's now the 17th. My business purpose looks like it copied from my last, so let me update my business purpose to be trip to Delphus. Pulling in my calculator app, it calculated my distance, which then gives me the code state. And so now you'll see over on the left, I have two expenses now. I have my mileage reimbursement, $45.51, 20 company. Okay. Now we've covered mileage reimbursement, we've covered company credit cards. The next expense type is just a standard employee reimbursement. So you go out and you don't have a company credit card and you go to Target and you need to buy things for a youth or whatever, or for the office, whatever it may be. That's where you would come up here, you'd hit the plus new expense button again, just like you did with the mileage. It's going to open it up on the right, this new expense window, and you're going to search for whatever you bought. So I'll search for supplies. And I'll say I bought office supplies. So I'm going to select supplies-office. And it's going to bring up the very familiar window. And so I'm going to say my transaction date was the 17th. That's when I bought it. My business purpose is office supplies for division. My vendor description is Target, type company, and is we need to reimburse the employee for that money because it came out of pocket. Even if you charge a credit card, you're still going to select cash here. Okay, my amount is $22.75, and I can come through and code once again my department, my state, my division, and my program. Everybody's user profile, much like mine, is going to be coded with your defaults. So if your default, division is Montgomery, you're going to have a state of Alabama and division of Montgomery right here, automatically. And the only time you'll need to update that is if you need to charge it somewhere else. Okay? Now I'm going to get into another type of allocation, which is available to do for any of these expense types. And let me pause because I see maybe a question out here. Yes, there will still be petty cash for each division. And we'll track the use of that using the same process that's in place. Okay, very good. So we've talked through the ability to explicitly allocate costs to your state, program, and division. But say for this office supplies purchase, I actually want the expenses to not be allocated to just one program. So let me just make this a real-world example. I'll choose Alabama. I'll choose Birmingham. And then you'll see Birmingham has these three programs plus the general. And I'm going to say, well, really, these supplies are going to benefit all of these programs. So if I were to select TFC, that means this entire expense gets charged to TFC. If I instead come over here to this default allocation, and I say, no, I don't want to do to TFC. I want to allocate this based on the standard allocation for that division. If I select this, it's going to override everything you coded to the left. And what AP is going to do is it's going to say, all right, and I'm going to make numbers up. For the Birmingham division, the division allocation is 40% TFC, 30% IIHS, and 30%, I guess that's unallowable. So that's not a great example, but you get my point. It's going to split that up and automatically allocate a portion of that expense across the divisions that are represented in that division. Okay? If I instead said that this $22.75 really benefits me in the programs I work in, then what I would do is I would say follow my employee allocation. So if I'm allocated 70% to TFC and 30% to IIHS. That's how we're going to allocate this $22.75. And again, once you select either employee allocation or division allocation here, it's going to override your default department, your state, your division, and your program. Okay, Sandy says the fund type should default to general. I'm sure we can take care of that. So Sandy, it's probably just the case in my user setup that I don't have a default fund selected to general. So we should go through the users and make sure that's how all the users are set up. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that different type of allocation? Because I do think it's something that you will use. I'll give you guys a minute to type just in case there's one out there. Okay, it looks like we're good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit save. And so now you'll see over on the left, I have my mileage reimbursement, I have my office supplies from Target, and I have my lunch at Rock Mill Tavern. You'll see next to my Target, there's this orange icon with an image of a receipt and an exclamation point. And what that's telling me is I do not have a receipt uploaded for this expense. So I need to go back in here, and I need to attach my receipt. Okay? So even though this is not my receipt for Target, because it's a fictitious expense, I'm going to select this one, and I'll hit attach. And that's going to make that go away. And again, you'll see the check mark, the blue icon, and there is my receipt. Okay? So I'm going to do one more example for you, and I'm going to do some more supplies for an office, and it's going to be office supplies for the division. I went to Staples this time, and I spent $500, okay? And so what I want to do is we've talked about two ways of allocating expense. One is I can choose from these drop-downs. Two is I can do the division allocation or the employee allocation. And now a third, and I promise you the final way, is to hit this allocate button at the bottom of the screen. And when I hit allocate, it's going to pop open a new window, and it's going to allow me to split this up as many times as I want, exactly how I want it. So if I were to say that 90% of this expense was for executive at America in general, then I would enter 90%. I can also allocate by the amount. If I go to this allocate by drop-down and select amount, now I can say $450 of this purchase was for the executive department at America, and the other 50 was for business development at America. So now what I've done is I'm able to allocate this across multiple cost centers, but it's not the same as my employee allocation or the standard division. I'm making my own up based on what I know I purchased. And so what I do now is I've entered my allocations. If I wanted to enter another line, you just hit this add new allocation, and it gives you another line. So I can make this 25 and 25 now, okay? And now I'll hit save, and I've allocated that expense. So when AP runs these reports through, they will know exactly how and where to charge those expenses, okay? And once again, you'll see on my Staples expense here, I've got that that icon saying I need a receipt image. And I'm going to leave that hang out there for a minute while we take questions, and then I'll submit my expense report. Okay, Diana, good question. There are two ways that the receipts will show up there. The easiest way is if you have that Concur mobile app, you'll open up the app, and once you get it, you'll see this very clearly. At the bottom of the app, there's an image of a camera, and it says receipt under it. If you click that in the app, it turns the app into a camera, and you can take a picture of your receipt right on your phone. Once you take that receipt, it's going to automatically upload that receipt image into Concur, so it's there in your available receipts. Okay? If you don't use the mobile app to take pictures of your receipts, what you would do is you would have to scan that receipt in, get into your email, open that scanned image, save it to your computer, and that's where if you hit attach receipt and go to this browse, that's where you can search on your computer for your receipt image. And then it will appear here. So again, I really encourage everybody to leverage the mobile app. It's got great functionality. If just for the receipts alone, you'll never lose a receipt again. Which is good for everybody. All right, so we've now created our expense report. We've learned how to do mileage reimbursement. We've learned how to deal with company card transactions. And we've learned how to do out-of-pocket transactions to get reimbursed. So now, it's now the end of the month, and I'm ready to submit all of these expenses for approval. Okay, so what I'm going to do, in the top right of my screen, I'm going to hit this Submit Report button. Okay, and you'll see right here, it's giving me a final review, and it's saying, hey, look, you have an exception that the system is flagging. And it's saying your Staples expense for $500 does not have a receipt, and it needs to have a receipt. It's required. So if this prompts you to dig up it should prompt you to dig up that receipt. So you'd hit cancel, go back to your Staples and attach your receipt, and then resubmit your report. If you have lost your receipt, I'm going to encourage everybody to put in the comment, lost receipt, okay? And then you're going to go to submit report. Oh, this time I did not save it, so let me hit save. And now I'm going to go back to submit report, and it's still going to tell me, look, you still do not have a receipt image attached. And I'm going to say, that's okay, I entered a comment, and I'm going to hit submit report. It will still allow you to send your report through without a receipt, and you can then work with your supervisor on whether they can approve that transaction or not for reimbursement. Okay? For now, I'm going to hit cancel because I have fictitious expenses in there that I don't want to get processed. Once I hit submit there, my supervisor automatically is going to get an email saying that Nathan Leonard just submitted an expense report for reimbursement, and here is a link to that expense report. Your supervisor can click that link, open the report right up, and all they're going to do is, much like there is a submit report button here, they can hit approve report, and that sends it on to accounts payable automatically. Your supervisor will be able to see how you've coded all of your transactions, because the expense report will look just like this. If they click on a transaction, they'll see how it's coded. If they need to update how you coded it, if they disagree, they have the ability to do that. If they want to review your receipts, they would just hover over the image and they can see your receipt. If they want to send the report back to you, I don't think I have any approvals in my queue, but let me just check. Yeah, I don't have any approvals in my queue, but if I did, what I would show you is, as your supervisor has that expense report open, there is the ability right next to approve report to say send back to employee. And if you hit send back to employee, it allows your supervisor to enter notes or comments that allow you to fix your expenses. So if you're missing a receipt and they're not going to approve it until you have one, they'll say, you're missing your receipt, I won't approve it until you upload it. It'll send the entire report back to you, the employee. You can address their comments and then resubmit it back to them for approval again. Okay? Any questions on that approval process? The system will email your supervisor once you've submitted a report. If your supervisor uses the Concur app on their phone, it will also send them a push notification pop up on their phone saying you have an expense report awaiting approval, and they can use the app to go in and approve the report just like they can do it on their computer. Yes, good point, Sandy Fisher. And she said if you submit a report and you thought you lost a receipt but you found it, you can actually recall the report. So I can actually demo that. So if I submit this through, I've now submitted this to Jane. It gave me a little summary of my expense report. Tells me it's going to Jane for approval. I hit close. I can then open this back up and hit recall. Okay, so on my Concur home screen, I see my submitted reports. If I open the one I want to recall, I open it up and I hit this recall button. And I just say, yes, I want to recall it. And now it's been recalled. So that means it's no longer in Jane's queue for approval. It's back to me and I can make any changes that I need to make. All right, let me check my the rest of the user guide here and make sure I hit everything that we wanted to. Oh, there is one more thing we can look through, and then Emily, I'll get to your question. If there's an expense or if there's a mileage trip that I've incurred more than once in the month, and it's literally the same exact trip, I can just hit this checkbox right next to the expense and hit copy. And what it's going to do is it's going to create another record that I can go in and code if I want. It's giving me a warning because it put the date. It always increments the date by 1 day automatically. So it incremented the date to tomorrow. So it's telling me this is in the future, so it's probably not right. So I'm going to go in and say this happened on Friday. And then all I do is I hit save, and that trip has been resubmitted. So again, if you're doing an expense report once or twice a month, and you know that you went to the same home visit from your office 5 times, you can enter that one time and then just copy it for each of your other trips. Okay, so Emily has a question. Looking at the mobile app, trying to enter a trip for mileage but does not pull up a map or anything. Is there another app that we should download / link to the Concur app, or should we just use our computer for mileage? Emily, that's a good question. I got to be honest, I have not tested entering mileage on the mobile app, so let me get back to you on that, okay? For now, I would say it's going to be easiest to use your computer, but we can reach out to our Concur contacts and see if there's a better way to do it via the mobile device. Sandy, can you send Nick at Concur a note on that question? Yeah, that's a great question. If they don't have it available today, Emily, I would really assume that they're going to have that eventually, pretty soon, because their mobile app has really it's very functional, and if that's something that we and others request they build out, I'm willing to bet they would do it. Okay, good question, Demetrius. So AP Finance, and in particular Sandy and Shirley, are the Concur experts. I'm always here to help as well. But if you have any questions that you can't resolve or you're stuck or you need a little additional training, you can reach out to Sandy and Shirley. We've already asked about the address book functionality, and they've said it's not out of the realm of possibility. So we'll keep you posted as we learn more. Okay. So at this point in time, everybody should have received an email from Shirley saying to go out to Concur, log in with your SAFY email address and the default password. And once you log in with that default password, it's going to ask you to update your password, which you can then do. You can also always access Concur via the SEW page and the Concur link. That's going to take you to the single sign-on page, which just uses your SAFY credentials for your computer. And pretty soon, that will be the only way we'll access Concur. So you will not go to concur.com. You'll launch into Concur from that SEW page. Oh, Diana. Are you talking about when I am in an expense? So to address Diana's question, hold on. So the buttons are down here. So you've got this itemize button to itemize those tips and alcohol. You have the allocate button, which allows you to specifically allocate expenses on a very granular basis. And you've got the attach receipt button. Yes, Shannon, I can go over mileage. So what you're going to have to do first, Shannon, if you remember, when you first get into Concur, you need to hit that create new report. And so that's not actually the home. Let me go back to the home screen and show you. So you see this plus sign with the new. You'll go to start a report. You'll enter in your report details. So again, your report name would be the time period for the report, whether it's April 1st to April 30th, March 1st to April 30th if you're behind. Enter that in, your business purpose, and then hit next. I'm just going to write test just to get through this. And then to enter your mileage, you're going to hit new expense. You're going to come over to this expense type search field, search for mileage, and it's going to pull up mileage reimbursement -employee. From there, you've got this familiar screen, and to get to the map, you hit this mileage calculator button. And that pulls up what Concur calls the waypoints. Rochelle, yes, I do believe that Paul and Dan are going to be putting a Concur link on your desktop as well. Okay. Well, I hope this has been a helpful hour for you guys. I apologize for those technical difficulties at the beginning. Rely on the user guide. We really did do kind of a step-by-step layout of how to handle each type of expense, how to allocate expenses, how to itemize expenses, and how to create and submit your reports. But if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to Sandy Fisher or Shirley. Or if they're not available, you can reach out to me as well, and we will get you taken care of 100%. Are there any other questions we can address while we're on the line together? Okay. So at this point, Javon, is it fair to say that they can use Concur starting now?
I believe so. Shirley sent out everything.
As long as they've created their account, they can.
Okay. So the hope is that you guys will get out there, log into Concur, and any expenses for mileage or otherwise that you have not entered into company mileage already, or the CRM check request already, you will enter those all into Concur starting today. Even if the expense was for March or February, you can still enter that expense into Concur.
For staff reimbursement only.
So aside from approving, if you're a supervisor, aside from approving your employees' mileage and company mileage, that's the only reason to be using company mileage for.
Yeah, and that's just for employee reimbursement. Right now, it's just for employee reimbursement. So the question on the petty cash, that would still go through the CRM process as you do that one now. We're only using Concur right now for employee reimbursement.
Very good. Kathy Trout, are you meaning to take control of my screen? Should I give you access? I just got a request.
Sorry, nope.
Okay, I'll deny it.
No.
There we go. All right, no worries. Sandy, is there a way to get a report of everybody's addresses out of company mileage?
I can check that out. I'm pretty sure there is, because when I pull reports, it shows me they're from and they're to, so I will check to see if I can get user information.
Okay, we'll get back with you, Rebecca, and Sandy can follow up with an email if it's possible. No problem. All right, so Concur is the new tool. Please use it. I'd recommend getting on it sooner rather than later, just so that you start using this training and it starts getting solidified in your minds. If you wait a week or two, you might be a little more foggy. So I really encourage you guys to get out there, today or tomorrow, and start entering those trips and creating expense reports so that you start committing this to memory a little bit more. But if you have any questions, please reach out and we'll take care of you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time. We very much appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you.
Right, thanks.
Kathy, no, they do not. Sorry, a question from Kathy Trout. They do not. If they just submit it in company mileage, they do not need to redo it in Concur. If it's in company mileage, you do not need to replicate anything. No problem. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Monday, and hope this was a good start to the week. Take care.